Since ancient times, eclipses have served as auguries for future events of humanity. Often related to humanitarian crises such as droughts, natural disasters, and especially wars. The Chaldeans of Babylon believed that eclipses were an omen of famine and epidemics. The Greek historian Thucydides attributed the defeat of Athens in 1413 to an eclipse. The death of the Roman Emperor Nero, or the assassinations of the Queen Catherine of Aragon, first wife of King Henry VIII, the first being an assisted suicide after a military defeat, and the second an alleged poisoning. Columbus threatened to make the moon disappear if there was no cooperation for the Aborigines in the February of 1504. Pests and plagues that raged the population during the Middle Ages, known as the Black Death, and even the First World War in 1914. All these events would be calamities anticipated by the concealment of the sun or the moon. There is no evidence that eclipses or the movement of other cosmic bodies can predict the fortune of a man. However, scientists do emphasize that anyone watching a solar eclipse must protect their eyes to avoid permanent eye damage caused by the infrared light emitting from the sun, burning the retina of the eye. An image with the power to physically hurt a human being. Curiously, infrared light is vital to appreciate objects and events beyond what can be perceived naturally by the human eye. This is the sound of Comet 67P as it follows its trajectory towards the perihelion. At a distance of 405 million kilometres from Earth, it moves at approximately 112,974 kilometres per hour. Coming from a region beyond the planets, from a large reservoir of small ice bodies, remnants from the solar system's formation. As a result of collisions, some of these objects are ejected into the inner solar system. As these bodies could contain the building blocks of life on our planet, they could be the ingredient necessary to finish it as well. One of the first encounters on its trajectory, it's a giant ball of gas. The god of the conquerors of the East, the ancient Romans, who led one of the earliest conflicts on Earth between West and East. It was considered the protector of the city, and even the state itself, guardian of law and social order, the protector and father of men. Still seen as the constructor and destructor, it protects the Earth from external bodies that enter into the solar system, with magnetic fields that extend to millions of kilometres and can cause interference with Earth's radios. 20 years ago, its gravity force captured a comet. It crushed it into pieces and finally disintegrated it. This event generated a terribly violent spectacle that lasted 7 days. As the second most influential body within our solar system, it helped to shape it from its very beginning. Observed by men since Babylonian times, but only until 1660 AC, when it was seen for the first time through a telescopic instrument, it unravelled its spots and colourful bands. Its surface dominated by colossal storms. Its temperature born in the core of the planet, the heat travels through clouds of gas and creates chemical mixtures that move counterclockwise to the surface. a system of circulation that can reach up to 600 kilometres per hour, feeding a storm that has lasted over 300 years. On Earth, recent deadly winds on land reached gusts of 320 kilometres per hour. On water, these storms reach winds of 300 kilometres per hour and gusts up to 370 kilometres per hour. These winds can devastate an entire community in a matter of minutes, leaving thousands wounded, missing, and dead. Using artificial simulations, scientists tried to recreate the movement of the stream that keeps flowing. Introducing different chemicals into spinning liquid containers, they tried to approximate an idea of the internal structure of the planet and its evolution. Currents that are in a permanent state of powerful flux can be devastating. The strength and duration of a storm like that would not allow any physical structure to remain standing, only a constant flow of colours in oblivion. This area remains in silence, a region that sits in ruins since the beginning of our time. The wreckage of the solar system, composed of irregularly shaped bodies, formed by the gravitational disruption of the outer planet's migration. It was formed in what astronomers described as the most violent period of the solar system, known as the Late Heavy Bombardment, which impacts are still visible on the surface of our moon. Without enough mass to retain material from other collisions, most of these remains never managed to become a larger body. They lack the force that is needed to keep the particles together, allowing them to gradually acquire a particular spheroid shape: gravity. It is thought that a body with enough mass located in space is capable to curve its surroundings. This is called curved spacetime. Nevertheless, these are not the direct means of the solar system's formation. They are leftovers of the elements that are mixed up again and again in order to create stable grounds for new structures. Urban development. The process of constant construction of space in a city that was completely devastated 70 years ago. Thousands of violent blasts that lasted 15 days left about 260,000 dead and 1 million people without homes in the so-called Battle for Berlin. Today, similar processes of destruction that reduce everything to debris are visible around the globe. Consider Jupiter's sun and the lover of Venus. represented throughout history as the god of warfare, father of terror and fear, known by ancient Egyptians since the 2nd millennium BC. Its hemoglobin colour is a result of the high content of iron oxide in its surface. They create deep red landscapes under yellow clouds. For a long time, it was thought to be completely arid and desert planet. After scanning 85% of its surface in 1972, an enormous system of cannons was found along the surface. The Valles Marineris. It is also the host of the highest volcano of the solar system, the Olympus Mons. Despite its hostile associations, for scientists, Mars represents hope. During years of intensive research, after traces of water have been found under the sheets of ice and in the polar regions, features known as reoccurring slope lines were confirmed to be signs of salty water running on the surface. The planet started to be considered as the next possible destination for the human species. The next step in the history of colonization. The Mars One colony project is looking to send private citizens on a one-way trip to the Red Planet during the next decade. Indeed, the idea that Mars could be populated by intelligent Martians has existed since the 19th century. All kinds of stories have been created about the planet, thus influencing many of the science fiction stories in popular culture, creating and eventually building up speculations about the future of human species. Often, those stories end up facing the deadly threat that the hostile environment represents for men. On Earth, the experience of this bellicose character is overwhelming. Its ubiquity escalates on all levels, all corners, and every spot of the planet. A permanent state of war. Its presence permeates our world, and his whisper surrounds us. Different technologies have been developed for space research. Lights, electromagnetic waves, and colour dispersion were revolutionary to look towards outer space. Infrared data and X-ray are necessary to observe qualities that would be invisible under other light conditions. Ultraviolet lights were necessary to scan the surface of Venus. The only planet within the solar system that rotates in the opposite direction. Retrorotation, possibly created by the impact of a huge body that caused it to start spinning backwards. Although Venus has always been associated with love, beauty, sexuality, and desire, the planet's environment was transformed by the greenhouse effect, changing its face radically. It has a temperature of 465 degrees Celsius and a surface full of active volcanoes constantly erupting. Its atmosphere is 90% composed of CO2. We can appreciate the ultimate consequence of a process that has already begun on our planet. cultural impact is also found in the so-called Curse of Venus, emerged at the end of the 15th century. An epidemic that spread through European countries and would later expand across the world. Symptoms such as severe vomiting, rashes, high fever, headaches, delusions would evolve until eventual death. Similar epidemics have emerged in recent years, spread by contact with the body, tissues, secretions, and body fluids. Doctors believe that in our cultural climate, a person with an infection raises a deep perplexity, a halo of imagination and fear. It becomes a symbol of the evils that threaten humanity itself. The last encounter on this long journey across the inner solar system is the Sun itself, the provider of heat and light, associated with the heart, blood, and circulation system. Like many other ancient cultures, the ancient Meshikas believed it was essential to maintain the strength of the sun god in order to prevent the end of the world. They did this by offering human sacrifices, a pre-Hispanic belief where provided blood is necessary to revitalize. This is part of a theological worldview that has nothing to do with the ongoing tradition of blood today. This is the awakening phase, when the comet finally reaches the perihelion. A moment of uncertainty when the comet's nucleus is lost inside a nebula, enveloped in a stream of dust and gas that extended to thousands of kilometres. Astronomers say that the singing comet waves are buried now under a variety of other features, like massive magnetic fields from the sun. At the closest point to the sun, here plasma interaction becomes more violent. Tongues of fire shoot out in all directions, one of the most hostile environments of its journey. Astrophysicists claim that in 5 billion years from now, the sun will enter its red giant phase. Its shell will become unstable, increasing its violent pulses until it blasts off its outer layers, and star formations will cease as the supplies such as gas and minerals needed will be exhausted. The same struggle for gas and fossil fuels generated an array of brutal conflicts across the world. It enhances as they become more scarce. In this point, incandescent solar wind will expand in all directions, destroying the atmosphere of our planet as it destroyed others, leaving them completely uninhabitable. Expanding outwards, it will take another 2 billion years to consume the Earth. This is the process of the death of a star. The photons that are produced during the energy transformation are similar to the gleaming points of light that travel across the cosmic expanse and straight into our retinas. Scientists argue that photons activate approximately 126 million light-sensitive cells, which later are translated by our brains into brightness, colours and shapes. At the end of the trajectory, the comet will head back towards the outer solar system. Its body will freeze until its next journey to the sun begins. Apparently, all these cosmic bodies influenced all aspects of Earth's development that turned into the world that we now know. Still, it would be impossible to establish a direct connection between them and human behaviour. It seems absurd that these images could somehow be linked to the movement of the cosmic bodies. Furthermore, it is scientifically impossible that they can anticipate the fate of a single human being or a community. Despite this, astrophysicists do claim to have the technology and the theory to predict the so-called immediate future with some certainty. They also have found in the shape of a rapidly spinning disk in the centre of the galaxy. The energy derives from mass falling into the accretion disk that rises temperatures, absorbing matter which it then shreds apart by spinning at high speeds. The increasing gravity attracts more and more objects. The increasing friction causes the disk to glow. Inspired by the rotary leaves created in 1935 by Marcel Duchamp, originally these images were collected and meant to be spun in order to obtain a spectrum of colour as a result of its movement, surprisingly resembling the cornea created by the orbital motion located in the core of the Milky Way. As faster the disk spins, the brighter it becomes. They think that the peak era of star formation is well behind us, and that the universe is already fading. When the stars run out of fuel, the only thing left over will be stellar remains, black holes, neutron stars, and white dwarfs. Later, these objects will be swallowed up by the supermassive black holes located at the heart of the galaxies. Protons, neutrons, and electrons will decay into subatomic particles, nearly a vacuum. Due to the universe expansion, the remains will be too far apart to interact with each other. This is the so-called heat death. When there is no more heat or free energy to fuel processes that consume energy, such as life, the space will slowly get darker and quieter, just as the spinning disk will do so as it runs out of images.